The princess's secret longing. The alien empire stretched across countless stars, ruled by kings and queens whose bloodline was said to be blessed by the ancestors. Among them was Princess Serenia, a young daughter of the royal house, living in a palace of crystal walls and silver halls that reached high above the shining city. She had everything that others could only dream of: servants, jewels, knowledge of 1,000 worlds. But inside her heart there was an emptiness that no treasure could fill. Every night, while the empire slept, she would stand by the tallest balcony, her golden eyes staring at the endless stars. She wondered what lay beyond those glowing lights, what other lives existed, and why her heart felt drawn to one particular world, a small blue world called Earth. Her teachers had always told her that humans were weak, short-lived creatures who survived only through chance and luck. But Serenia had heard other whispers, stories from travelers and secret records hidden deep in the archives. They spoke of humans as beings who fought against impossible odds, who carried fire in their spirits, who never gave up even when crushed by empires. These stories stirred something inside her, something dangerous. For in her empire, admiring humans was forbidden. The council had declared them a threat, not because they were weak, but because they were unpredictable, because their will could never be fully broken. So to speak of them kindly was to risk punishment, even exile. Still, the princess could not help herself. Each time she closed her eyes, she imagined meeting a human, speaking with one, hearing how they saw the universe. In her dreams, she saw a man standing proud against 1,000 enemies, refusing to kneel. And though she did not know his name or face, her heart ached with longing. She pressed her hand against her chest and whispered to the stars, asking why her heart beat so differently from her people. Her days were filled with duties: attending the council, greeting nobles, training in the arts of diplomacy and tradition. She played her role with grace, but in her heart she carried her secret like a flame hidden in the dark. No one around her could see it, but she feared that one day it would burn too brightly and reveal itself. That day came closer when news spread across the palace. The empire was preparing to host a meeting with a human ambassador. The humans had risen in power over the past decades, building ships faster than anyone expected, and though the empire despised them, they could not ignore them. The council agreed to speak with a representative, though many muttered that it was only a trap to measure human weakness. When Serenia heard this, her heart raced as if a storm had entered her chest. For the first time in her life, she might see a human with her own eyes. She tried to hide her excitement, but her hands trembled as she dressed for the council meeting. Her attendants thought she was nervous about the politics of the day, but the truth was deeper. She was not nervous about politics. She was nervous about destiny. That night before the meeting, she could not sleep. She walked alone through the silent halls of the palace, her steps echoing softly on marble floors. The guards bowed as she passed, unaware of the war inside her heart. She paused before a great mural on the wall, a painting of the empire's victories against countless races. At the bottom of the mural, almost erased, was a small image of humans kneeling in chains, a reminder of a battle long ago when the empire claimed dominance. Serenia stared at the image for a long time, her hands curling into fists. She whispered to herself, "Chains may hold the body, but they cannot hold the heart." The words shocked even her, for they sounded more human than alien. But once spoken, she could not take them back. She turned away from the mural and returned to her chamber, her heart heavy but burning with a strange fire. As the first light of dawn touched the palace towers, Serenia stood at her window again. She looked toward the stars where Earth orbited, hidden far away yet close to her soul. She did not know the man she would meet, or what fate awaited her, but she knew one thing: her life was about to change. The emptiness inside her heart would finally be tested, and the secret longing she carried would no longer remain hidden. In that moment, as the empire prepared for its meeting, a young princess whispered into the morning air, "Show me the truth of humans." She said softly, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. And somewhere beyond the stars, destiny seemed to listen, waiting for the right moment to answer. First glimpse of the human. The great hall of the alien palace was alive with whispers and tension as the day of the council meeting arrived. Towering pillars carved from black crystal reached high above, glowing softly with runes of ancient power. Alien nobles filled the chamber in flowing robes of gold and silver, their eyes gleaming with suspicion, pride, and arrogance. The air itself seemed heavy with unspoken judgment, for this was the first time in many generations that a human was allowed to stand inside the imperial court, and though the council called it a diplomatic gesture, everyone knew it was more a test than a welcome. Princess Serenia entered the hall with her royal guard. Her presence demanded attention, yet her veil and crown of emerald light concealed much of her face. Her people saw only a dutiful daughter of the empire, poised and obedient, but inside her chest her heart thundered like war drums, for she knew that behind the giant doors of the chamber, the human ambassador waited, and with each step she felt the weight of destiny pressing closer. She had dreamt of this moment for years, yet now that it was real, she felt fear as sharp as it was thrilling. The doors opened with a deep rumble, and silence fell over the court. All eyes turned toward the figure who entered. A single human man walked forward, surrounded by a small escort of guards from his own people. He was not dressed in glowing armor or jewels. He wore a simple dark suit. Strong in its modesty, every step he took was steady, every movement calm, though he was surrounded by towering aliens who looked down on him. He never once lowered his head. His eyes were clear, sharp, filled with a quiet fire, the kind of fire that Serenia had imagined so many times in her secret dreams. For a moment she forgot to breathe. She had expected a human to look fragile compared to her people, but what she saw was something different. His frame was lean but powerful. His posture carried confidence without arrogance, and when he looked at the council, there was no fear in his gaze. Instead, there was a strange mix of defiance and respect, as if he acknowledged their power but refused to bow to it. Serenia felt her chest tighten, a warmth spreading through her veins. This was not a weak creature. This was a man who carried storms within him. The alien council began their questions at once, their voices echoing like thunder, demanding answers, pressing him with sharp words. Some mocked him with hidden insults. Others tested his patience with long speeches about the superiority of the empire. But the human stood firm, his voice steady, his words simple and clear. He did not try to sound greater than he was, nor did he shrink before their challenges. When they demanded why humans sought to grow among the stars, he answered, "Because we are alive, and to live is to seek more than the ground beneath our feet." His words hung in the hall like a spark of fire in dry grass. The nobles muttered among themselves, some scoffing, others frowning, but Serenia's eyes never left him. Each word he spoke struck her heart. It was not only what he said, but how he said it. There was truth in his tone, honesty without fear, and she realized with awe that this man stood before an empire older than his entire civilization, and yet carried himself as if he were equal. For a princess raised to believe in order, obedience, and tradition, such a sight was both dangerous and irresistible. As the council argued among themselves, Serenia found her gaze drifting again and again toward him. She noticed the scars on his hand, faint but real, marks of battles fought, of struggles endured. Her people prized smooth skin untouched by hardship. But here was a man whose skin told stories, stories of fire, struggle, and survival, and she found it more beautiful than the polished perfection of any noble she had ever seen. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she was looking not at a subject or rival, but at a mirror that showed her what courage truly looked like. Then, in one unguarded moment, the human ambassador turned his head. His eyes caught hers from across the chamber. Time seemed to stop. The noise of the council faded. and for the briefest instant it was as if only the two of them existed. Her breath caught, her hands trembled inside her jeweled sleeves, and her heart pounded so loudly she feared others might hear it. His gaze was not soft, nor was it harsh. It was steady, searching, as if he too had sensed something unusual in her, as if he knew she was not like the others around her. The spell broke when the alien king raised his voice, declaring that the council would continue its debate on another day. The session ended, and the human was escorted out. Yet Serenia felt as if part of her soul had gone with him. She walked silently back to her chamber, her attendants speaking around her, but she heard nothing. Her mind replayed his words again and again. His posture, his courage, the fire in his eyes. She had admired him from afar, but now that she had seen him with her own eyes, her longing had transformed into something more powerful, something dangerous. That night she could not sleep. She paced her chamber, staring out at the stars, whispering to herself, questions she dared not speak aloud. Why did her heart race for him? Why did she feel as though fate had woven their paths together long before they met? Why did she, a princess of the empire, feel more alive in one glance with a human than in a lifetime of duty among her own kind? She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the rhythm of her heart, faster and stronger than ever before, and she knew that her secret longing was no longer only a dream. It was real, and it had just begun. Dangerous conversations. The palace garden stretched like a dream carved out of crystal and starlight. Tall trees with glowing leaves whispered softly in the night breeze. Fountains of liquid silver poured into clear pools that reflected the twin moons above, and rare flowers opened their luminous petals as though singing to the stars. The garden was a sacred place meant only for the royal family, a place where silence reigned and guards stood far away so that the princess might walk in peace. But tonight it was not peace that filled Serenia's heart. It was fire. For she knew the human ambassador had been given permission to walk the gardens as a sign of courtesy, and she could no longer resist the call of destiny. She stepped quietly through the marble archway, her veil drawn low, her robe trailing like a river of shadow behind her. The night air was cool, yet carried a tension that wrapped itself around her. And as she walked among the glowing paths, her eyes searched for him, every beat of her heart thundering with both fear and hope. Then, by the fountain's edge, she saw him, the human man, standing tall, his hands folded behind his back, staring up at the moons with a quiet expression that held more depth than words. For a moment she simply watched, entranced by the sight of him alone in a garden that had belonged to her ancestors for 1,000 years, as though he had always belonged there, as though the universe itself had placed him in her path. Gathering her courage, Serenia approached, her footsteps soft on the crystal path. The man turned at the sound, and his eyes fell upon her. They widened just slightly, not with fear, not with arrogance, but with calm curiosity. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect that surprised her, for most ambassadors bowed deeply before her people. Yet his was subtle, as if he would show courtesy but not submission. She felt her throat tighten, yet she forced her voice to be steady. "Do you find the garden pleasing, human?" she asked softly, her tone carrying the formal sharpness of her people, yet beneath it trembled the vulnerability of her true self. The man's voice was low and calm. "It is unlike anything I have seen before. The air, the light, the beauty of this place. It feels alive." His words held no flattery, only truth, and that truth made her chest grow warm. She found herself moving closer, her hands clasped tightly within her sleeves, afraid that her trembling might be seen. "You speak as though you carry no fear," she said, watching him closely. "Do you not realize where you stand? You are surrounded by those who see you as little more than prey." He met her gaze without flinching. "Fear has its place, but it cannot rule me. We humans live short lives compared to your people. If we waste them in fear, then we have nothing left. We stand because it is all we can do." His words cut through her heart like a blade of fire. They carried no grandeur, yet each syllable felt heavier than the gold crowns of her empire. She realized with a shiver that he spoke as though each word had been lived, Suffered and fought for, Serenya's voice grew softer, though still cloaked in formality. Why do your kind resist so much? Why not bow to power? Why not submit and survive? Other species have bent their knees to the empire, yet your people cling to their pride like it is breath itself. She expected him to falter, to hesitate, yet he did not. His eyes gleamed like steel beneath starlight. Because pride is not just pride, it is memory, it is dignity, it is love. When we resist, it is not for ourselves alone. It is for those who come after us, our children, their children, and the ones yet unborn. If we give that up, then we may live a little longer, but we will no longer be human. The words struck her like a storm, and she found herself speechless. She had studied diplomacy, history, politics, yet never had she heard a reason spoken with such clarity. In her people's view, survival was strength, but here stood a man who claimed that survival without honor was worse than death. It was madness, yet at the same time it was beautiful. Her chest ached with a feeling she could not name, a dangerous feeling that glowed brighter with every heartbeat. The conversation stretched deeper into the night. He asked her questions in return, questions no one had ever dared to ask a princess. He asked if she believed her empire's victories brought true peace. He asked if endless conquest filled her people with joy or only emptiness. He asked what she, a princess of the empire, truly desired when no one was watching. She wanted to be angry, to strike him down for such daring words, yet instead she felt exposed, as if someone had seen the secret flame she kept hidden within her heart. For the first time in her life, she spoke without the weight of her crown pressing on her, her voice trembling with truth. I dream of freedom, of a life where choice is not chained by duty, where a heart may love as it wishes. Once the words left her lips, she froze in terror. She had revealed too much, too openly. Her breath caught in her throat, but the human only looked at her quietly, his expression not mocking, not pitying, but filled with something she had never seen before, understanding. The garden suddenly felt smaller, as if walls were closing in. Serenya realized that if anyone heard them, her life could be ruined. Admiration for humans was forbidden, and to speak of her longing was treason against her family's honor. Her eyes darted to the shadows where guards might be watching. She stepped back quickly, her voice hardening again. You must go. This conversation has gone too far. If they discover it, you will be executed, and I will be cast into shame. The man studied her quietly, then nodded with calm acceptance. Then I will leave. But know this, princess. What you said tonight is not weakness, it is strength. And no matter what chains your people try to place upon you, they cannot chain what lives inside your heart. His words lingered like fire as he turned and walked away. Leaving her alone beneath the moons, Serenya stood frozen, her hands pressed against her chest, her breath unsteady, her heart louder than the fountains and the winds. She had just spoken words she had never dared to speak. She had just seen a man who understood what her own people never could. And though fear gnawed at her, she felt more alive than ever before. She knew now that she stood on the edge of a path she could not turn away from, and that the dangerous conversation in the garden was only the beginning, the forbidden bond. The days that followed the secret meeting in the garden weighed heavily on Princess Serenya. She moved through the palace like a figure of porcelain, graceful and perfect on the outside, but fragile and burning within. The council gathered daily to discuss the human ambassador's words, debating whether his people should be seen as rivals, allies, or enemies. Yet Serenya's mind was not on politics. Her thoughts returned again and again to the man she had spoken with under the moons. His words lingered like echoes in her heart. They had awakened something inside her that she could no longer silence. Every time she saw him in the great hall, standing tall and fearless before the council, she felt her pulse quicken. She tried to keep her gaze averted, yet her eyes betrayed her, seeking him in every crowd, measuring every movement, memorizing every word. She began to notice details no one else cared to see. The way he straightened his shoulders when the council tried to crush his spirit, the way his jaw tightened when they insulted his people, the way his hand brushed against the scar on his wrist when he grew restless. These small things etched themselves into her memory as though carved into stone. At night, she returned to the balcony of her chamber, staring into the stars as she always had. But now the stars no longer carried silent questions. Now they carried dangerous answers. She imagined his voice speaking beside her, imagined the warmth of his presence, imagined what it would mean to walk not as a princess bound by duty, but as a woman who could choose her own path. Her longing deepened into a bond that she dared not name, for to name it would be to admit treason against her bloodline, against her empire, against everything she was raised to believe. Yet destiny cared little for the rules of empires. It pushed her forward in ways she could not resist. A week after their first conversation, fate offered her another chance. She found herself in the library of the palace, a towering hall of knowledge where scrolls and holographic records stretched higher than sight. She often came here to read forbidden texts hidden between safer works, and to her shock, she saw him there standing among shelves of alien history, reading with careful eyes as if absorbing every word. Their gazes met once again, and this time neither looked away. They spoke softly at first, words cautious, heavy with fear of discovery, but soon the silence broke, and their voices flowed like a river long dammed. She asked him why he risked standing with such confidence in a hall that despised his existence, and he told her that humans had lived for centuries surrounded by storms, that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to walk forward even when fear screamed louder than reason. She told him of her own chains, of a life shaped by the expectations of her father and the council, a life where her heart's voice was silenced for the sake of duty, and to her amazement, he listened. Truly listened. Not as a subject listens to a ruler, but as one soul listens to another. With every meeting, their bond grew. It began in whispers beneath the moonlight, in stolen moments in the library, in brief glances across the council chamber. What had started as curiosity transformed into trust, and what began as trust grew into something far more dangerous. Serenia found herself smiling when she remembered his words. She found herself feeling braver when she thought of him. She even found herself questioning the Empire's victories, wondering if strength meant conquering others or protecting what you loved. Each thought was a rebellion, each heartbeat a betrayal, and yet she could not stop. The danger grew sharper with each day. The walls of the palace seemed filled with eyes. Servants whispered. Guards lingered longer in the shadows. The council spoke of traitors and spies, and Serenia knew that if anyone discovered her feelings, she would be condemned. Her father, the king, would see her not as a daughter but as a weakness, and in her empire weakness was punished without mercy. But the fire in her heart refused to be extinguished. The forbidden bond had taken root, and no fear could uproot it. One night, as the moons glowed low and the palace slept, she slipped into the garden again, her heart pounding louder than her footsteps. He was there, waiting as though he had known she would come. When their eyes met, no words were needed at first. The silence between them was not empty but full of longing, full of unspoken truths. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice deep and steady. "You risk too much, princess, if they discover this. Your life will not be your own." She looked at him, her eyes shining with defiance and sorrow. "It has never been my own," she whispered, and the truth of those words bound them tighter than any oath. They spoke for hours beneath the stars, speaking of worlds and dreams, of burdens and choices, of love that crossed boundaries no law could bind. By the time the first light touched the horizon, Serenia knew with certainty that she could no longer return to who she was before. She was no longer only a princess of the empire. She was a woman whose heart had chosen, and it had chosen a human. Yet, even as joy filled her, fear lingered, for she knew their bond could not remain hidden forever. Already shadows moved within the palace. Already suspicion was growing, and soon the empire itself would force them to face the truth. The king's wrath. The vast council chamber glowed with cold light as the day of judgment arrived. Towering columns of black stone rose high above the gathering, their runes burning faintly like watchful eyes. Nobles in robes of crimson and gold filled the room with their sharp voices. and guards stood motionless like statues carved from steel. Princess Serenia walked in silence at her father's command, her steps echoing on the polished floor, her heart heavy with dread, for she knew the whispers had reached the king. Her secret meetings with the human could no longer remain hidden. The alien king sat upon his throne of obsidian, his crown of burning light resting heavily on his brow. His presence filled the hall with fear, for his voice carried the weight of centuries. He looked down at his daughter with eyes that burned like molten fire, eyes that had seen victories across 1,000 worlds and crushed rebellions with the flick of a hand. "My daughter," he said slowly, his voice rumbling like thunder across the chamber, "there are whispers that you forget who you are, whispers that you look with favor upon a human. Tell me this is a lie." Serenia's chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to silence the storm before it broke. Yet her lips trembled, and silence betrayed her. The nobles hissed like serpents, the council roared in outrage, and the king's hand clenched upon the arm of his throne. "So it is true," he thundered, the chamber shaking with his wrath. "My own blood has been poisoned by weakness, by the filth of a lesser species." His voice cut through the hall like a blade, and Serenia felt her knees weaken. Yet even as terror pressed against her, a small voice inside whispered that the truth should not be silenced. The king rose from his throne, his height towering over all. His cloak flowing like a storm cloud, he declared before the council that Serenia would be bound in duty, that she would marry not by choice but by decree. "You will be given to Lord Vathar," he announced, naming a ruthless warlord from a rival empire. "This marriage will seal peace, and your shame will be hidden beneath duty." The hall erupted with applause and cruel satisfaction. Yet Serenia felt her world collapse, her heart tearing with pain. For the thought of being bound to a man she did not love was worse than chains. It was a death of the soul. She lifted her eyes, her voice trembling but clear. "Father, I cannot." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Silence fell instantly. The council froze. The nobles gasped. No one had ever heard a princess defy the king. His eyes narrowed, burning hotter. "You dare defy me," he growled, his voice so deep that the pillars themselves seemed to shake. Serenia's hands trembled, yet her spirit stood tall. "I cannot give my heart to one I do not love," she said, her words shaking yet unbroken. "My heart is not a weapon to trade for peace. It belongs to me alone." The chamber erupted in fury, nobles shouting that she was corrupted, that she had betrayed her blood. Some demanded she be cast out. Others called for her confinement. The king raised his hand, and the hall fell silent again. His face hardened like stone. "You are no longer my daughter," he declared coldly. "You are a weakness to this empire, and weakness must be burned away." His words struck her harder than any blade. Yet even as despair filled her, she refused to bow, unbeknownst to the council. Hidden among the shadows near the back of the chamber, the human ambassador watched, his eyes burning with fury and resolve. He had not meant to eavesdrop, but when whispers reached him of the king's intent, he could not stay away. He had heard every word, seen every tear in the princess's eyes, and in that moment he knew that her fight was no longer hers alone. It was his as well. He clenched his fists, knowing the risk. Yet ready to stand for her even if the entire empire turned against him, Serenia was dragged away by guards, her wrists bound in golden restraints that glowed with suppressing energy. As the doors closed behind her, she caught one last glimpse of the human's eyes in the shadows. Steady and unbroken, her heart surged with both fear and hope. She knew he would not abandon her, not now, not ever. That night, locked within the cold silence of her chamber, Serenia wept for the first time in years. The weight of her father's rejection crushed her chest. The thought of being handed to a warlord burned her spirit. Yet beneath her sorrow, a spark remained. The memory of the human's gaze, the memory of his words in the garden, words that told her chains could not bind the heart. She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering to the empty room, "They can take everything from me, but they cannot take this." Far away, in a hidden corner of the palace, the human prepared for what was to come. His people had taught him that when a fire threatened to consume all, sometimes a single flame of defiance could light the way. He knew the cost of defying an empire, but he also knew that some bonds were worth every risk. The king had declared war upon his daughter's heart, and the ambassador knew that the time had come to answer with more than words. Flight and betrayal. The palace no longer felt like home to Serenia. It felt like a cage made of crystal and fire. Every step she took echoed with suspicion. Every glance from a guard burned with judgment. She was no longer treated as a princess, but as a prisoner cloaked in silks. Her father had stripped her of affection. Her council had branded her a traitor, and soon they would bind her in chains of marriage to a man she despised. Yet within her chest the forbidden bond burned brighter. For though the empire pressed its weight upon her, she carried the memory of the human's steady gaze, the memory of his words that no empire could erase. That night, under the cover of darkness, she found him waiting in the shadow of the garden walls. The human had moved through the palace with the skill of a warrior who knew how to live unseen. His voice was low, urgent, and filled with fire. "We cannot wait any longer. They will take you away soon, and once they do, you will be lost to me, to yourself. And to the truth you carry, come with me tonight, princess. Come before the dawn steals your choice." His words struck her heart like a blade of light cutting through the darkness. She trembled with fear, for she knew the risk. But she also trembled with hope, for she knew this was her chance to choose her own path. Serenia hesitated, her mind torn. Her duty to her blood pulled one way, her longing for freedom pulled another. She thought of her father's wrath, the council's fury, the empire's scorn, yet then she thought of her own heart, of the fire that had been born the night she first spoke to him in the garden, a fire she could never again deny. She lifted her chin, her golden eyes shining even in the shadows. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "I will come." The words sealed her fate, a vow made not to empire but to herself. Together they moved through the sleeping palace. Slipping past the guards whose armor gleamed faintly in the moonlight, each corner was a risk, each step a gamble. Yet the human's presence gave her courage. His movements were sharp, practiced, each gesture guiding her as if he had walked this path 1,000 times. They passed through hidden passages carved long ago, secret doors meant for escape in times of siege, and for the first time in her life, Serenia felt not like a princess bound by walls, but like a woman breaking chains. Yet fate is cruel. For just when freedom seemed near, betrayal struck. From the shadows stepped one of her closest attendants, a woman she had trusted since childhood. Her eyes cold, her voice sharp as a blade. "I knew it," she spat. "I knew you had fallen. You would shame us all for the touch of a human. I will not allow it." Before Serenia could speak, the traitor raised a signal stone that burned with red light, a flare that split the night sky. Within moments, the silence of the palace shattered. Horns blared. Guards rushed like a flood of steel. The path to freedom collapsed in a storm of betrayal. The human drew a weapon from his side, a blade forged not of alien crystal but of human steel. Its edge gleamed fiercely in the moonlight. He stood before Serenia like a shield, his stance unshaken, his eyes burning with defiance. "Stay behind me," he commanded, and she obeyed. The guards surged forward, their weapons flashing, their voices roaring with fury. Yet the human met them with the ferocity of a storm. His blade struck true. His body moved with precision, born not of privilege but of survival. He fought not as a soldier of an empire but as a man with everything to lose, and his courage was more terrifying than any army. Serenia's heart pounded as she watched. Her own blood screamed at her to run, to surrender. Yet her soul whispered another truth. She could not abandon him, not now, not ever. The fire inside her refused to let him stand alone. She seized a fallen guard's weapon, her hands trembling yet steady enough to lift it. Her people had trained her in ceremonial combat, but tonight she fought not for ceremony but for love. Each strike clumsy yet filled with desperation. Each breath proof that she had chosen her path. But the Empire's strength was vast. Wave after wave of guards filled the garden. The red light of the traitor's flare burned across the sky like a wound. and Serenia knew that soon they would be overwhelmed. Her chest tightened with despair, yet even in that moment she felt no regret, for she would rather die here beside him, free in her choice, than live forever as a chained daughter of the Empire. Then, above the chaos, the king's voice thundered across the night, his fury shaking the very stones. "Seize them both," he roared. "Bring the human to me alive. I will make him watch as his defiance is torn from him. And as for my daughter, she will learn that betrayal is paid in blood." His words fell like a hammer, and Serenia felt the weight of doom. Yet even as the guards closed in, she and the human stood side by side, their breaths ragged, their weapons stained, their eyes unbroken. The traitor who had exposed them smiled cruelly from the shadows, her voice dripping with venom. "You thought you could escape, but you are still a princess of the Empire, and no princess escapes her chains." Serenia looked at her with both sorrow and fury, her voice rising above the clash of steel. "I am no longer your princess. I am my own." Her words struck with more power than any blade, and for a moment even the guards faltered, but the moment passed, and the tide of soldiers closed in once more. The night blazed with fire and steel. Serenia and the human fought as one, their bond no longer hidden but declared with every breath, every strike, every heartbeat. And though betrayal had trapped them in the jaws of the Empire, their defiance burned brighter than ever, a flame that refused to die. The declaration of love. The council chamber burned with tension as dawn's light poured through the high crystal windows. The night of betrayal had ended with both the princess and the human dragged before the throne in chains, their bodies bruised, their clothes torn, yet their spirits unbroken. Serenia's wrists were bound by golden restraints that pulsed with cold energy. The human's arms were pinned by guards who held him as though he were a wild beast. And above them all sat the king, his fury radiating like a storm that could crush worlds. Nobles filled the hall, their whispers sharp as knives. Some demanded punishment, others demanded death. All waited to see what would become of the princess who dared to defy her blood. Serenia lifted her eyes to her father, her heart heavy with fear yet burning with fire. She saw no trace of the man who once held her as a child, no trace of a father who smiled at her youth, only the face of a ruler who valued power above love. His voice struck the chamber like thunder. "You have shamed me, daughter. You have betrayed your blood, your empire, your people. For what? For this human?" He spat the word like poison. "You will be stripped of your name, bound in chains, and forgotten. And he will suffer until his soul is broken." The hall roared with approval, yet Serenia felt no despair. Instead, she felt clarity. The fear that once bound her was gone, replaced by something greater. Her gaze turned toward the human, bruised yet standing tall, his eyes steady even as the Empire closed around him. He met her gaze, and in that silent moment she understood. This was the truth she had sought all her life. The freedom she dreamed of was not in duty, not in crowns or thrones, but in the courage to love without chains. Summoning all her strength, Serenia stepped forward. The guards tried to pull her back, but she pushed against the weight of their grip. Her voice rang out across the hall, trembling yet clear. "I will no longer live in silence," she cried. The nobles gasped. The king's eyes narrowed. But she continued, her voice rising with every word. "You may bind my hands, you may curse my name, but you cannot command my heart, and my heart has chosen. It belongs to him." She turned toward the human, her golden eyes shining with tears and defiance. "I love him, and nothing you do will change that." The hall froze in shock. The words hung in the air like lightning that refused to fade. The nobles erupted in outrage, their voices clashing like 1,000 storms. Some cried for her death. Others shouted that she had brought ruin upon the Empire. Yet Serenia stood unshaken, her chest rising with every breath. She had spoken the truth that burned in her soul, and the truth once spoken could never be taken back. The king rose from his throne, his fury shaking the very stones. "You dare defy me with such words," he thundered. "You dare disgrace your people before all. You will be cast into the abyss." and this human will beg for mercy until he is dust." His hand lifted. The guards moved to strike, yet before they could, the human tore against his bonds with a strength born not of power but of desperation. The guards struggled to hold him, but he shouted above the chaos, his voice raw and unyielding. "Do what you will to me, but you cannot kill what lives in her heart. You cannot break what we are." His words struck like fire into the chamber, silencing even the loudest of voices. Serenya's tears fell freely, not of sorrow but of pride. The human's defiance mirrored her own, and together they stood against an empire. Two souls unbowed, the council hissed, the nobles cursed. The king's fury deepened, yet the bond between them glowed brighter than the hatred that surrounded them. The forbidden bond was no longer hidden. It was declared before all, a flame that even the universe could not deny. The council demanded punishment, but among the shadows of the hall, whispers began to spread. Some aliens stared not with fury but with awe, for never before had they seen such courage. Never before had they witnessed a princess of royal blood stand before the empire and choose love over power. And never before had they seen a human face death with such unbroken fire. Doubt seeped into the cracks of fear, and for the first time, the empire trembled not from enemies at its gates but from truth spoken within its walls. The king roared again, ordering silence, his face dark as stone, yet Serenya did not falter. She raised her voice once more, louder than the council, stronger than her fear. "You can strip me of title, you can take away my name, but you cannot erase what I am. I am not only a daughter of this empire, I am a woman, and I have the right to choose whom I love." Her words struck like a blade into the heart of tradition, and though the king's face burned with wrath, the truth of her voice could not be denied. In that moment the human lifted his head high. Though blood trickled from his wounds, his voice joined hers. "And I will not kneel, not to thrones, not to crowns, not to fear. We humans may be small, but we are unbroken. And as long as one breath remains in me, I will stand for her." His declaration thundered through the hall, uniting with hers in a chorus of defiance that no chains could silence. The hall shook with rage, yet beneath the noise a deeper silence stirred. A silence of doubt, of fear, of change. Serenya knew that they might not leave the chamber alive. She knew the empire would crush them if it could, but she also knew that the flame they had lit this day would never be extinguished. Their declaration was more than love. It was rebellion. It was hope. It was the beginning of something far greater than either of them alone. As the guards closed in, as the king's wrath reached its peak, Serenya and the human turned to each other, their eyes meeting one final time, and in that gaze was eternity. A promise stronger than life, stronger than death, stronger than empires. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and that truth was the greatest victory of all.